Hello, today let's follow yet another hype and let's explore another model that is now on top of this hype wave. Probably this time I didn't fully miss it. Today we'll talk about Shuoer S12. Shuoer, not sure about the correct pronunciation. Of course, creators of the brand didn't try to make the task of pronouncing it easier. And it's a really popular now model with planar-magnetic driver, but what makes it so exciting, it's a reasonable price. It cost just $150 and taking into account pretty well-tuned sound, good accessory set, packaging and other stuff, it's a model that offers a really competitive feature set. And actually it was a huge spoiler of the forthcoming review, so let's have a closer look. Package is pretty nice, looks attractive, nice polygraphies, nothing super fancy but still made accurate and pretty premium. On the back side they printed technical specifications, among the most interesting 16 ohms of impedance and 102 decibels of sensitivity. And silver-plated monocrystalline copper cable, not sure about materials, but let's assume that it's what declared here. And underneath that sleeve you get a box with the earpieces themselves, and huge thanks to Shuoer that they use regular foam, not that pseudo velvet. I really hate it. You'll get 3 pair of foam tips, some manual and warranty cards and other stuff like that. So what's that? It's quality control stamp. Some information, and actually inside you'll get a photo. Actually, in my opinion, it's better than hand-drawn girls. And here is the case with, I think here we'll get cable and probably more tips. So yeah, I was right. Stock cable and 2 set of tips. So interesting pure gray silicons and classical white with black stamps. So traditional set of tips for the modern earphones. In terms of design, earpieces are pretty straightforward, made of aluminum, looks pretty simple but built well, and in general you see the shape, wearing comfort is pretty nice, and spouts have proper angle, they have slightly above average length, so sound isolation is about average and it will be enough for noisy street or for public transport. Probably in subway or on the plane you'll need something better, but not more than that. And there is a lip for holding the tips and protective grill, so all that part that I usually pay attention for is here. And cable is replaceable and it's, it's pretty good. One of the best offers for the $150 I've seen. So let's untangle it a little bit. Here used 2 pin connectors, and still I like that. In my opinion, in the not super expensive models, 2 pin connectors are a better choice. So here it is. Fitting nicely into the sockets, and that's working also pretty well. There are ear hooks formed. They holding shape really well, no memory wire inside, but still they do their job nicely. And the cable itself looks pretty fancy and attractive. You can see some complicated braiding inside that diagonal stripe pattern. It's slightly softer than average, pretty comfortable in everyday usage. Almost not getting hard when it's cold outside. Here is a splitter with chin slider, and after splitter it goes just twisted in spiral down to the absolutely regular metal jack. So cable is also pretty nice. To summarize this part, I think you already got the idea. For this price, model offers maximum and probably slightly more than that. And of course about the sound, I gave them about 60 hours of burn-in, but significant changes in sound were only during first 2 or 3 hours. So if you decide to get them, probably they don't spend time burning them in, they will burn in while you'll be trying different tips. And find proper fitting tips is much more important here. I like this gray silicones, they are soft and provide a nice and secure fit for me. But of course tips are subjective. In terms of overall tuning, probably Shuoer does what everyone will expect. It's a V-shaped signature, but thanks to the planar-magnetic driver, it's slightly on more resolving side comparing with traditional dynamic drivers. It's not balanced armatures, but it is not dynamic drivers, so it's somewhere in between, and that makes overall sound signature pretty fast, pretty resolving, and overall it's it's a good combination of audiophilic and mass market tuning. So it's technical, but at the same time not dull and definitely not monitoring. So low frequencies are slightly accented, they have a really good depth, but at the same time, because of the planar magnetic driver, don't expect the weight typical for the dynamic drivers. Lows here will be slightly on the faster side and slightly on the drier side of things. They are pretty impactful with a really good punch, but not as weighty as dynamic drivers. For me, it's a good trade-off because I prefer speed and resolution over the weight and quantity. And that type of representation is really good in rendering textures and also offers a great amount of small nuances and overtones, making realistic instruments sound pretty engaging. But at the same time, electronic music also sounds pretty pleasant, at least to my ears. But if you have a lot of pop music and electronic music in your media library, probably you can prefer a slightly more weighty representation. But it's still a matter of taste. For me, the current amount of impact is more than okay. And as a first example, actually, as a player, for example, I will use FIO M11 Plus, new one. First example track, it's Onuka, Ukrainian folk electronic project. I mentioned it a few times, but it's a really stylish work because they using a lot of well-recorded samples. They making superb, rich clips with lot of involving different fashion designers and so on. And I like Ukrainian folk electronics. Well, many of you probably heard Go A on last Eurovision, but Onuka was even before that. Actually, they were all both of these collectives are on the Ukrainian scene for the quite a long time, but Onuka were more famous. So nice, good, tight, impactful bass line, and these earphones render it nicely. But on top of that, you'll get a lot of instruments and unusual space vocal, and these earphones deliver it really well. Mid frequencies are slightly focused on the micro contrast and slightly on the drier side of things, but not too much. In exchange, they give you a great resolution, lot of small nuances and details, great sense of realism. Earphones are pretty critical for the quality of records, of course, with that focus on the micro contrast. With some properly recorded stuff, you'll be rewarded with super realistic sound and perfect amount of nuances and details. But at the same time, issues with mastering and mixing will be also noticeable. Earphones don't try to add some weight or make some focus on the dynamics and emotions. That part they play as is. And the imaginary stage is noticeably above average in width, slightly less than width in depth, but with a good layering, so in terms of 3D stage they are pretty nice and good. And as an example, I've got yet another Ukrainian project, but totally different. It's Motanka, and it's also folk, actually folk project, but this time it's folk metal. Great theatrical acts with a lot of artists involved, with a lot of instruments, and their vocalist Verba, it's his surname, is absolutely great in different types of singing, and actually it's an interesting music. So if you like folk metal, and if you're okay with the language that you probably don't know, then it's a really good choice. And of course such genre requires really good technical performance, and these earphones delivers that really well. Treble is accented to compensate low frequencies, giving a typical V-shaped signature. To my ears it's not sharp, and thanks to the good resolution and even some really basic layering present in sound of these earphones, treble here sounds with a good sense of realism and with nice overtone saturation. But if you're sensitive to the treble, it's better to try them before buying, because natural and slightly focused on the micro contrast mids and similar treble representation could be a bit on the sharper side. For me it's not, but if you're sensitive, I warned you. And at the same time it has a good resolution, sounds airy and with a lot of overtones, so really pleasant type of representation. And the third track, actually, let's go from Ukraine to the actually former Yugoslavia. Of course it's not correct way of naming that Balkan states, but at the time of the recording of this track it still was Yugoslavia. It's Bijelo Dugme, Ostariš. Really good track, nice portraying of that time when new wave was fresh and really new. And why I selected this track here, it's filled with different types of percussions and different cymbals, small bells and brushes and many things like tickling your ears, and these earphones played in a really pleasant way. And in terms of pairing, actually there is not much sense in using them with regular smartphone or tablet. You'll need at least some good digital tonal converter, not entry level, something better and with good resolution and control. They are not super power hungry, but as I've said, a bit of additional power will be really beneficial for them. And speaking about the conversions, actually let's focus on the planar-magnetic models, because balanced armatures will go even further into micro contrast and will give you less weight, and typical dynamic driver models, they will give you more weight and different representation. So of course probably the main question is about 7 Hz. 7 Hz has less treble, or actually less focused treble, and more weight on the mid frequencies, and overall more darker signature. So 7 Hz is for those who like more mid, more weight and less treble and more comfortable sound. Here you'll get more focus on the micro contrast and slightly more treble. And actually it's pretty interesting, because in terms of frequency response charts, models are pretty similar, but real perception slightly differs for them. At least trying with that pair that I own, because some people say that 7 Hz changed the tuning of their timeless during the production, and that's a bad thing. If they don't do that. And also Tin Hi-Fi P1 is more focused on the micro contrast, drier, more aggressive, more forward, and at the same time slightly more detailed, because it's digging even more into the micro detalization. And I have a P1 Plus, but it's still waiting their turn to review, so I'll try to review them in some near future and do the comparisons. And that's it about Shuoer S12. It's a really interesting model if you want to try in-ear planar-magnetic earphones and without breaking your piggy bank or selling your kidney. If you like technical but at the same time not too monitoring representation, S12 will also give you that. Thank you for listening, thank you for your attention, and of course have a nice day.